This was a great story. I enjoyed this book so much. I've had such a great run of good books recently. I've been really lucky. This was a fantasy romance, but the spy in the title was not false advertising. We get a good spy story too, a mystery. Plus, I loved the system of magic. It was really well developed. One problem with magic is that it's really easy to make it too powerful, which then makes it really hard to write a plot without falling for stupid plot points or things that don't make sense or huge plot holes. If you keep your magic system realistically limited and yet still it can do some interesting things, that's a really good premise for a fantasy novel. Set up in this book is that there are people who have certain talents, which are basically extreme versions of more common things. There's blurs who are very super fast, there's people who are super strong, and there's the talent that the heroine, Micah, or it might be Mika, I'm not sure it's how it's supposed to be pronounced. Her talent is the most interesting of all, which is cool since she's the heroine. She is a mimic. That means she can take the shape of different people. Now, this is what I mean by it could be really easy to make this a little too versatile, but she can't just see somebody and immediately become them. She actually practices her faces, and she does it every day like it's this skill that she's actually developing, and she even goes to a school for it. In fact, the opening scene is sort of like a college graduation from the School of Mimics, which is kind of a cool concept. Our heroine has been training to be a spy in the enemy empire. Her people are sort of this republic of islands. Well, they're a kingdom, but they're a unification of multiple kingdoms of these islands that have banded together against this sort of more dictatorial republic or empire that's near them. And she's practiced their language, she's practiced faces from their empire, and she's hoping that she's going to be a spy in the empire. But instead, she's sent to the royal court. Of course, this is also where she happens to meet the love interest. He's not actually the prince, but he is a nobleman. There's another really interesting relationship in this book, and that is a bromance, although I guess it's sometimes called a lady bromance. There's not a good way to put the words romance and sister together. It's a friendship that develops initially from less than a stellar start with her employer, who is, at first, we think a completely spoiled and self-centered princess. But we learn that there's a little bit more to this princess than meets the eye. She's much more intelligent than she lets on. She's also much more compassionate than she lets on, or that our heroine sees when she first goes to work for her, and she just seems like kind of a bossy brat. So if you'd like to see more strong female friendships develop in your books that you read, this is a great one for you, because it's a very good relationship, a good friendship that develops, and it's just as strong and important to the story as the romance is. She also has another friend who doesn't appear as much in this story because it was her friend in the college or in the school, and so they're actually just separating at the beginning of the book. That other friend is important to the plot, however, because her boyfriend disappears, and the mystery of what has happened to him, as well as what is happening to other talents who are mysteriously disappearing to apparently nobody's concern, is one of the central plots in the book. In fact, this is why she has been assigned to the court rather than to the enemy empire, because it seems like somebody, maybe the enemy empire, maybe somebody at court itself, is betraying the talents, and where are they going? That's the mystery, and the fate that awaits them, which is probably not going to be a good fate, but we don't know what it is yet. That's one of the things that keeps the story driving along, and it's a very interesting and intriguing plot. So in many ways, this shares a lot in common with a book that will combine a mystery with a romance, and of course with magic. All three of those elements are handled really well, so it makes a good combination. Incidentally, she also has a family, and they aren't dead at the beginning of the story. She has parents and brothers, and she actually has a real family. And that's just kind of nice, because there's so many characters in fantasy fiction that are just orphans. It's nice to see somebody who actually has living family members. Of course, one of the reasons it works is because she's of a certain age. It's more like a story about a college age person than a high school age person, although it's appropriate for their culture, so it's not exactly parallel to our own. But basically, she's leaving home, so her parents aren't going to be overshadowing her. But I just thought that was an interesting side note. You can have a fantasy story where the character is not an orphan. The hero, Caleb, is a pretty good hero. I wouldn't say the romance is quite as angsty as a romance that I sometimes prefer, but it's a good, solid romance. And then towards the end, when we have the setup for the second book, then we do get that sort of twist in the heart angst that I really like, because there's this very sad setup for the second book, which separates the two of them, not physically, but something is going to come between them that's going to make it really difficult for them to be together, as they both have to do their duty. And so that made it really like, oh no, what's going to happen? So it's a good setup for the second book, and I hope there is a second book. I couldn't find it when I was looking for it, but I'm presuming there'll be a second book in the series. And this is a recommend. I like it. If you like fantasy, if you like romance, it has also, like I said, a very strong mystery. If you don't like stories that are just about the romance. And it's also, if you're tired of like the usual young adult tropes in some of the current kind of young adult field, this is a little bit more unusual and different. It's more straight up fantasy, more high fantasy. So I think it's still really entertaining, and yet it still has a lot of those elements of young adult literature, which I think a lot of readers of young adult like the romance and the magic and the strong characters. I'm going to cut this up because I got to go get to dinner with my family. Tara out.